This is the third in a series of 4 monthly updates about the continuing economic crisis. We will have one more in December. I believe it's the 7th, an auspicious date if you think about it. We try to not only give you a brief running update about what's going on, but also to pick a couple of particular topics that have become perhaps more important over the last month than they had been earlier, to go into them in a little bit more detail. And I sent out an email to as many of you as I have on the list to tell you what those are. I'm going to tell you in a minute. And then we open it up for a general discussion, questions, and I try to respond where appropriate and have some discussion amongst you all where appropriate as well. So thank you for coming over here. The reason for that is, as you may have noticed when you came in, that the place over there looks different. That's because a television program, which one? Law and Order, is actually renting the place for an enormous sum of money, at least enormous for the Brecht Forum, and to shoot one or more of their programs in there. So you will actually, if you watch that program, you will see the Brecht Forum on television, even though it will not be identified as. Okay, let's talk a little bit in general, and then I'll turn to the particular topics. The particular topics, I'll tell you now, so you see where we're going, revolve around an extraordinary thing that has been going on starting early last week. Not the election, which is what you might have thought, but in the shadow of the election, obscured by the election, the Federal Reserve of the United States, our central bank, made the decision. They actually made it some time ago, but they enacted their decision, carried out their decision, to begin pumping $600 billion more money into the United States economy. And it's that I'm going to talk about. Why they did that, what that means, and what its likely consequences are, both economic and political. But before I do, here's a general update of some things you may have noticed or may not have noticed, but are important. Since we last met here, that is, over the last month. First, what we talked about last month has continued and will continue, and that is massive demonstrations and strikes in Europe. The phase in France has slowed down a little bit, although nowhere near as much as the press here wishfully reports. But another day of action in December, I believe it's the 16th of December, but I'm not sure, a day of action in all Europe, such as they had on the 29th of September, has been decided and will be led by all the unified trade unions. On the 24th of November, there will be a general strike in Portugal against austerity, which is helped by the French, who are helping them organize it. For those of you that are not aware, in Portugal, there is a very left-wing Green Party that works together with the Communist Party, and together they get about 20% of the vote, normally. And so you're talking much stronger kind of left organization politically than, say, the Green Party and the Communist Party in France, which are together much smaller than what they are in Portugal. And continuing unrest across Europe, particularly in Spain, in Greece, and increasingly in some of the Eastern European countries. Been a lot of action on the part of the Solidarity Union in Poland. Some of you might find the ironies of that historically enjoyable. That union is now on a different side of the issue and is one of the unions cooperating in the strikes across. So that is continuing. The phase is a little different. In France, the bill was passed because Sarkozy, the president, controls the 2 houses of their parliament, because they were elected before the crisis really hit. So you have a peculiar situation in which roughly 70% of the people support the demonstrations, and a lame duck minority government is pushing through these bills, and how that plays out is anybody's guess. But the strikes are continuing, the French are going to have more of them, and I think the turmoil there will certainly continue. Second thing I would suggest to you, which we're going to come back to, is that the only reason the Federal Reserve would have made the extraordinary decision to pump $600 billion more money into the economy is the clear and unambiguous recognition on their part that this crisis is not only not over, but not going even away. And they're going to have to take another dramatic step, such as the one they're undertaking now, to try to boost the economy by flooding it with even more money than they already did. So that's a sign, if you needed one, that the economic crisis is very much with us. And all, come on in. There's chairs all over the place, just that I can't see them. Yeah, and you can stay here if you like.
Oh, thank you, Colin. Looking forward to that.
Okay. And as I say, we're going to come back to what the Fed did and why it did it, but it's a clear sign of how serious this crisis is. Third thing, exit polls during the election. Those are those polls they take that they ask people what's on their mind, why they voted the way they did. Come on in, there's plenty of chairs, just find them. It's just quickly because the singing is about to start. The exit polls indicated, among other things, the following: that the overwhelmingly #1 issue on voters' minds, whether they voted Republican or Democrat, or for that matter, other party, was the economic crisis. That was clear. That was the dominant issue. That is what shaped people's voting. At least that's what they said. And I think that's an interesting sign as well about the conditions. And then there's the index of the crisis that I find the most useful, which is walking between 15th Street and 8th Street on 6th Avenue and observing how many stores have no one in them and for how long they have sat there empty. Because that is as good a sign of the economic crisis as one could want, and better than most. Just for the record, our unemployment has not changed over the month. It remains approximately 15.5 million people out of work, full-time out of work, looking for jobs, and another 10 to 12 million in those two other categories I told you about earlier, namely the category of people who have a part-time job but not voluntarily, they want a full-time job, and then the people who used to be called discouraged workers and are now increasingly called marginalized workers. It takes a really interesting person to come up with these labels, but a marginalized or a discouraged worker is a person who is not working but has given up looking for work. You're only counted in the United States as an unemployed person if you do not have a job and you are also looking. So the 15 million is only those without a job who are looking. It doesn't count the involuntarily part-time and those who've given up looking, and who explain that to the interviewer who asks them the question. So if you put it all together, which by the way, the Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps these records, all of these numbers, and if you put all three together, we remain at approximately somewhere between 17 and 18% of the American workforce is either unemployed, involuntarily part-time employed, or discouraged, marginalized. That's more than 1 in 6, which means basically every American family has somebody in that situation. If not an immediate relative, then a more distant relative. That has not changed. The fiasco since last month in the home foreclosure is the last general thing I'll mention. The foreclosures continue at the same high rate that they were going before, with the following problem. For those of you that didn't read closely, there were, yeah, just come on in and find any place.
Okay, well, look at it.
It turned out that the foreclosure process was done, as the whole mortgage process was done, fast and loose by a lot of these companies who didn't bother to get the right signatures of the right officials in the right way on the documents. And that has produced a wild chaos, because the only entity that can throw you out of your home if you stop paying your mortgage is the legal owner of the property in which you are located. The person who you send your monthly mortgage check to is called a mortgage servicer, but is not the bank, for example, that you keep sending your checks to, is typically not the holder of your mortgage. They're not the owners. So if they come and push you out of the house because you haven't paid, they don't have the legal standing. And if you have a lawyer, that process stops because they're not entitled to put. So you have to get the person who owns the actual mortgage, which could be an investment outfit in Dubai. It could be a banking structure in France. It could be all kinds of things. And the paperwork that links this mortgage to the ultimate owner after it changed hands all these times, that paper trail is a colossal mess.